the last session, we talked about linearity and the conditions of linearity, and we saw how those conditions led kind of naturally to the notions of vectors and matrices. Vectors and matrices form the basic building blocks of linear algebra, so we have to understand those things very well. In today's session, we will get into it and define some of their operations and properties. First of all, vectors. For our purposes in linear algebra, vectors are basically a list of numbers, an ordered list of numbers. The ordering is very important, as you shall see in a second. So let's start with an example. Suppose we have the data set of three numbers, weight, height, and age. So three numbers. The reason for choosing weight, height, and age is that in physics, they have the dimensions of mass, length, and time. In linear algebra, the visualization as a line segment with an arrow is just a matter of convenience. In reality, this is just a list of numbers, an ordered list of numbers, much like any kind of ordered list you might have in a programming language. In physics, one of the reasons why they don't really like mixing different dimensions is a scaling issue. For instance, if you have weight, height, and age, just like I wrote it down here, and there's a vector, so you can compute the size of the vector. That would be, in this case, 71 square plus 175 square plus 51 square rooted, and that would give you the length of that vector. Now, somebody else might come and say that I can measure the height in meters instead of centimeters, and suddenly the size of the vector is going to change. If it was something like a length vector in physics, all of them will have the same kind of units, and the units would change uniformly. And even though the norm changes, you know what it's going to change to from centimeter to meter, and it's easy to handle, and that's the only right way of doing it in physics. But in computer science, it's completely okay. Well, when I say it's completely okay, this scale change does have an implication in some machine learning algorithms, such as, for instance, k-means clustering. If you use different scales, meters instead of centimeters, the clustering might actually end up being different because the contribution of each vector into the clustering algorithm might change. We are not immune to the scale changes in computer science, but we are much less sensitive to it. In any case, for our purposes, we'll just look at these things just like numbers. These are just numbers to us. We don't really care what the numbers actually mean, what they stand for, what they are measuring. We will write these numbers as a column. So our vectors are going to be column vectors. So we have the first element is the weight, the second one, the height, the third one, the age. And if you take a second measurement of somebody else, the weight, height, and age, you have to have the same ordering. The first element will have to be the weight, second one, the height, and the third one, the age. Otherwise, you're making a mistake. You cannot add them. You cannot really say anything about what the elements stand for. So to reiterate, vectors for our purpose are ordered list of numbers. Even though we don't have to specify what physical quantities these numbers stand for, we might have to say whether these numbers are real, rational, integer, or even complex. And that you will specify by saying that these are vectors over the field of real numbers, etc. In our case, for this course, almost all our vectors, till the very last chapter or so, they are all going to be real vectors, and we are working with real numbers because we are in computer science, the application. In computer science, we typically use only real vectors. This hierarchy is not that critical for us for mathematics, because we know that the integers form a subset of rational numbers, which form a subset of real numbers, and real numbers are just special cases of complex numbers. So there is a hierarchy. So if you take an integer and for some reason you scale it by 0.5 or something, and then it becomes a rational number, or if you scale it by pi or something, then it becomes a real number, that's okay. The program will hopefully take care of such promotion of types, but it's something to keep in mind. So for a vector of n elements, we will write x a member of Rn. So let's unpack this statement. X in bold character is a vector for this course. This E here is a set notation because Rn is a set of all vectors of n components with real components. So that is what Rn stands for, and that's the way you read it. So you will say X is a member of Rn using set notation. Now, we saw last week that we could define a scalar multiplication for vectors that would be just scaling all elements by the same scaling factor. So if I have weight, height, and age as a x vector, 2 times that vector is just scaling the numbers by 2. S times that vector, S is a real number, a number, that's why it's not bolded, would be scaling each one of them by the factor S. That is a scaling factor. It's called a scalar for obvious reasons. Scalar means a number as opposed to vector, which means a list of numbers, and it is in the same field as the vector. So if X is a member of Rn, then S is supposed to be a member of R. One important property which might sound almost too trivial to mention here is the fact that if you scale a vector, you get another vector. That is a closure property of Rn under the operation of scaling. So Rn as a set is closed under scaling. By scaling, you will not get another vector. You will not get a vector that is outside that set. Can you figure out what that says about the 0 vector? In other words, I have X, a 3-component vector. X is in R3. Then is 0, 0, 0 a vector? It has to be because I'm just taking any vector in R3 and using the scaling factor 0. 0 is a perfectly valid scalar that I can use because it's a real number. Then multiplying it, so I'll get 0, 0, 0. That has to be a vector. And that is a very special vector. It's got special properties that we will keep coming back to later in this course. Another thing is, if I scale a vector by a given scalar, is the scale version unique? That also sounds almost too obvious, doesn't it? If I take a vector, let's say our original vector, 71, 170, 51, scale it by 2, I get 142, 150, 102. Is that going to be a unique vector? Can I get a different vector starting with the same original vector and the same scaling factor? Obviously no. It is unique. And that uniqueness also will play an important role in some of the theories that we will develop later. So scalar multiplication, let's take an example here. I have a vector 1, 2. It's a 2-dimensional vector so that I can show it to you. And that is the way I can kind of represent it. Like I said earlier, vector is an abstract entity with 2 components there, but we can kind of visualize it in this, what we will later call a coordinate space, with X along the horizontal axis and Y along the vertical axis. I go 1 step, 1 unit to the right to represent the first component, and 2 units in the vertical direction to represent the second component. So I get that vector, that is my red vector. I scale it by 2, I get 2x, which is 2, 4, 2 along the x-axis and 4 along the y-axis. Now I take the original vector again, scale it by say -1, I get -1, -2, so it's a vector in the opposite direction. Then some other random number, say pi by 2, I get a different vector. As you can see, I keep getting vectors along that line. So all the vectors that come about because of my scaling lie on the same line. So this visualization, as I show it to you, may not be that engaging. So I have a visualization on my website for this book, la4cs.com. We can go there and look at it. It starts with the same visualization that we saw in our slide, but here you can move it around and change it. And then you can see that all those guys, regardless of which vector you start from, they all lie on the same line. In other words, you can think of a vector as though it is defining a line for you in the coordinate space. So we started with 3 dimensions in our slides, and then in our visualization 2 dimensions, because that's the only thing we can actually visualize. Now we can generalize this to any number of dimensions. That is the beauty of linear algebra. So we start with 2 and 3, and now we have n being any number, 200, 2000, 2 million, doesn't matter. And we will say that for any vector x in Rn, n-dimensional vector of real components, and for any scalar s, a real number, we define the scale version of it, scalar multiplication, by saying that each component will have to be multiplied by the same factor, and the resulting vector will be a member of Rn. By scaling a vector in R3, you cannot get a scale version in R4, it will be still in R3. Similarly, a vector in Rn, when scaled, will be another vector in Rn. In other words, Rn is closed under the operation of scalar multiplication. And we say that whether you multiply on the left or on the right, you get the same answer. So scalar multiplication is commutative, and this is because of, as you know, each one of these little multiplications inside the vector is actually commutative. It's just real numbers multiplying. So the last statement, that the scalar multiple of the vector is a member of Rn, it states that the set of vectors is closed under the operation of scalar multiplication. And zero vector, of course, is a member of Rn, with n zeros in this case. The second operation will be vector addition. So that is easy, just add the corresponding elements. And this is the reason why the ordering is important. You cannot add the weight of one vector to the height of another vector in our original example. So I have weight 1, height 1, age 1, weight 2, height 2, age 2 as x1 and x2, two vectors. You can add the weights together, heights together, and ages together, and then report the sum in the same order so that people know that the first one is weight and the second one is height, and so on. And that will be a member of R3. Again, if you add two vectors, you get another vector. So the set of vectors is also closed under the operation of addition. And obviously, you cannot add a vector in R2 to a vector in R3 because you have to have enough number of elements. You cannot have one extra here or one less in another one. Those things will not work. Then there is this idea of an inverse. That means for any given vector, you take that vector, scale it by -1, add it to itself, then you get the zero vector. So there is an additive inverse, just like you have it for a number. Well, actually, I left it as a question for you, but the answer is yes. Now, let's look at some examples. So I have two vectors. The red one is 1, 2, and the blue one is 3, 1. So 3 to the right along the x-axis and 1 to the top vertically along the y-axis for the second vector. You can just add them, you get that, and there is this construction that you can think about, which is basically transplanting the blue vector to the tip of the red vector and then drawing from the origin to the tip of the blue vector in this case, and that will be the sum. As you can imagine, you can do the same thing by transporting the red vector to the tip of the blue vector and then completing the diagonal. So it's like a parallelogram, and the green vector, the sum, is a diagonal. Let's visualize this a little bit. So this is what we had, but we can change the vectors here. I can see how it works. So interactivity, I am told, is something that students like. So go here and play with it if you are not totally convinced, or if you want to see some special cases, for instance, what happens when the vectors are on top of each other or when they are on opposite directions, etc. So generalizing it to Rn, so we can write that for any vector x1 in Rn, so the components are x11, x21 up to xn1, and the second vector x12, x22 up to xn2. So the first index is actually the row number. The second index is to say that this vector is the first vector and this vector is a second vector. Then you define the sum x1 plus x2 by adding the corresponding elements, and as you can imagine, it is a member of Rn. And you can also see that every one of these little additions is just a real number being added to another real number, so that is commutative. So all the good properties that you have in the field of real numbers will kind of extend to the vectors also. So that's what I've written there. x1 plus x2 is the same as x2 plus x1. Vector addition is commutative. The last one, stating that the sum is a member of Rn, states that the set of vectors is closed under the operation of vector addition, as well. Now the next concept is the idea of doing both these things at the same time. You can scale and add at the same time. If you have a couple of vectors or many vectors, you can scale them by some numbers and add them, and that what you're doing there is something that we will call a linear combination. You're linearly combining vectors. And this, as you might imagine, because it's a linear thing, linear operation, is kind of like the backbone of linear algebra. So we got scalar multiplication and addition. Let's do a scaled addition, and that's a linear combination. So two vectors belonging to R2, select some scalars, some numbers, S1 and S2, real numbers, and make a linear combination. So you get that. So S1, X1 plus S2, X2 is that. And now you can ask kind of theoretical questions like, what is a set of all possible y's of this kind, all possible linear combinations? Of course, y is going to be a member of R2. It will turn out that any vector in R2 can be written as a linear combination of these two vectors, my red vector and my blue vector. And that thing, the idea that any vector in R2 can be written as a linear combination of these two vectors, will also play a crucial role in our understanding of the underlying spaces at some point. But let me just introduce a word to you. What it means is that these vectors, my red vector and my blue vector, they span all of R2. Span all of R2. So here it is. I have my red vector, my blue vector, and I can add them. I get that point. That means I'm scaling them by 1 and then adding them. I'm scaling them by some other number and adding them. So the red one got scaled by some number 2. The second vector got scaled by -1.5 or something, some other number. And then I get a different green point, a different green vector. And I keep doing it. I can get all possible points in this R2 starting from these two vectors. Later, in the next video, we will say that the reason why you can actually get all possible vectors in R2 starting from these two vectors is because these two vectors are not on top of each other. They are what we will call linearly independent. So linear independence is going to be one of the topics of the next video.